Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Now, first of all, I think we should talk a little bit about the continuation of the saga. So last week saw quite a bit of development in the whole situation in EVE Online around complaining that they were nerfing the carriers and the super carriers because they were creating too much wealth in the game. And here, I must say, the developments were pretty good in general. What I liked the most, I must say, is that CCP pulled or put the pin back in the grenade a little bit by coming out with numbers, and I actually think that that is super important, and it's something that CCP should do a lot more. So basically CCP gave us the numbers that they got from probably their worst 5 days, but it was still over a period of 5 days that carriers and supers got like, I don't know, a crazy amount. It was maybe 25% or 50% of all the bounties created in the game at that time. And that was going to a tiny percentage of the players that have been or were active in ratting in those 5 days. And so they actually did show true numbers that there was a problem, or a problem in the potential of these carriers and super carriers when it came to ratting for ISK in Norsec. And so that's why they decided to nerf them a little bit. Still, they didn't nerf them as hard as they had first announced. So CCP also probably realized that nerfing them completely into the ground was not the best either. I would say there was a bit of a discussion there, and in the end CCP showed us what the problem was and came back a little bit on going too far in the nerfs as well. So overall, I think CCP handled that situation decently well, but unfortunately for them, of course, by then the situation had escalated because a lot of people were starting to complain about not this specific problem, but the root causes of all of this. And a big problem was the ghost training bug that was still unanswered by CCP. Now, I had in the previous EVE talk, I talked about all of this, and I said that for me the root cause was probably the skill extractors and the skill injectors. That basically allows for a lot of skill points to bounce around characters, going for the best builds at any given time, basically chasing the meta much more quickly than what was possible with the regular skill queues. Now, ghost training is, and I think still is, but CCP is fixing it, of course. It's a bug where you could create an alpha account, then you could plex that account, put in a massive skill queue with including Omega skills, and then if you would allow that account to lapse and you didn't log into it anymore, that would basically keep the account training at the Omega level speed without you paying for that account. Now at the end, after that, when you wanted to basically cash in on the exploit, you had to do a few steps that are not entirely what most people would do. So you had to reactivate the account into an Omega account without logging in, so going through the account management page, and that's when you would have like a massive pool of skill points that you never paid a subscription for, basically. And as a result, they could then extract all of that, bring that to the market, and make a lot of ISK that way. Once they started to set up hundreds of these accounts, that would be ghost training. Now, on that front, CCP finally came out and said, yeah, this is an exploit, and we are going to do something about it. In fact, if they find out that you in the past as well abuse this mechanic, I would say that the cutoff point is probably going to be extracting the skill points. That's then there's going to be consequences for having done that. But starting this up now, continuing to do this now, I think is going to be a straight up ban. And also, of course, for like a person that has an Omega and that accidentally lets that lapse and got like a couple of days training or even a couple of months training by accident, they're not going to ban you for that. I would definitely say that extracting the skill points and doing this on dozens, if not hundreds of accounts, those are obviously cutoff points where CCP will probably make a move on you and ban at least those accounts from the game, if not you permanently from the game. So yeah, the ghost trading, I don't think it's going to completely fix all these problems about basically players being able to chase the meta much more effectively through the new skill extractors and skill injector systems, but at least the ghost training stuff, which was creating an incredible faucet of skill points into the game, that is being fixed, looked at by CCP, and they are going to do something about the people that have been exploiting that. Now, after that, a little bit more controversy came out when CCP decided to give out the Concord chips for FanFest attendees, because everyone was super surprised when someone showed us a screenshot of them having like 150 or 170 of them, selling them for contracts making billions and billions of ISK, because it turns out that CCP had given out these Concord chips, not one per ticket, but one to every account that was linked to the email that you used for purchasing your FanFest ticket. Now, big mistake in my opinion. Not so much. CCP Falcon said, yeah, you know, that's how we're doing it this time. They did later on also post a statement that they see this as a learning experience and that for eVegas they're not going to do the same thing again. But the problem is not that people are getting a lot more Concord chips, because, you know, the price just crashes more quickly on the market itself. They're not going to rake in the trillions of ISK on all of these ships. You know, they're going to have to cut down on the prices as competition increases. Now, the real problem with it is, of course, the unfairness of treating FanFest attendees differently, depending on just, you know, someone that, for instance, set up skill point farms or abused ghost trading. Those guys are not gonna get to keep all of their wealth, but yeah, it's this disparity between a FanFest attendee that just, you know, loves the game but plays on one account. He gets one ship. Someone else that goes a little bit crazy and overboards makes 150 accounts, even if they never really plan to use any of them. And those guys get 150 of those Concord chips. That's just something that CCP should have thought of, and that it should never have happened. But it did happen, and overall, when it comes to comparing the sizes of these controversies, this is of course the smaller one, because in the end, for the market itself, for the players itself, you know, you don't have to buy any of these Concord chips for the crazy prices if you don't want to. CCP also said that there would be other ways of gathering these ships later on, and as a result, the unfairness is to, of course, in my opinion, FanFest attendees that only got one or two ships. So what would be the solution here? Obviously, they're not going to turn this around, and it's not as big a deal, but for both the ghost trading problem and the Concord chip problem that we've seen here, it's the exact same solution as what they have done to defuse the situation with the carrier and super carrier nerf. Give us numbers, come out with actual numbers on what's happening so that the players can make up their minds about whether it is indeed a problem, is it fair what CCP is doing. And, you know, usually I do think that it will come out that CCP tries to do their best for the game and for all the players. But yeah, give us those numbers. On the ghost trading thing, honestly, I think that they should give us the numbers on the number of accounts that they're banning, not necessarily the number of people, no names, nothing like that, but just how many accounts are we talking about that have actually exploited this and created SP into the game that well, that's probably going to keep slogging around there. Give us those numbers. How much wealth are you taking out of the game, which I saw posted that they are going to do. And for the Concord ships, I would personally like to see how many Concord ships did you give out, how many of them are there in the game compared to how many FanFest attendees are there. That way we can know if we're talking 1 or 2 outliers that got hundreds of Concord ships, but 99% of the attendees got 1, 2, or maybe up to 5 ships or something like that, you know, the more reasonable numbers, or is it something that is really imbalanced where 10% of the player base got, you know, and there's hundreds of thousands of them out there all of a sudden, which is something that should never have happened, of course. So yeah, give us those numbers. It's possible that the Concord ships is just 1 or 2 crazy people that have hundreds of accounts on there, and that, yeah, that are extremely lucky, of course, but then the damage to the game itself is rather limited, and it would actually be something that CCP could fix if they would choose to. And for the ghost trading as well, gives a bit of an idea on the impact that it actually has had on the game through a few of the ban numbers, so that we maybe can understand better why it took so long to actually publicly state that this was an exploit, how many people were actually abusing this, what kind of an impact does all of this have on the game. So I would say overall, most of the situations have been somewhat resolved. CCP came out with answers and with actions for the future that should keep things from happening again, but I would like to see actual numbers from CCP that I think would be something that would help the entire player base to understand the situation better, and maybe also again to diffuse the situation just like it did with the carrier and super carrier nerf. And that's gonna be the introduction this week. I'm not sure how long all of the drama is going to keep happening like that, and how long I'm gonna keep doing those long introductions. But yeah, this week was definitely worth it, because basically the situation and the entire discussion did move from just the carrier super nerfs into different territories, and of course CCP then made some more mistakes with the Concord ships. Moving on to the market, plex are at 12 minutes. That's, yeah, 12 minutes, pretty far down the line here. Let's get started and let's take a look at those. Now, plex are up again, and for plex we're undoing all the filters so that we can see that the first plex are selling for 2.8 million. In the player-owned trade hubs, we have to go down very far this week in order to find the Cheetah Station, where the plex are selling for 2.87 million, so 70,000 extra as a premium for selling in Cheetah 4.4. The buyers are at 2.77 million, so very close to the buy orders of the player owned hubs here, and we can see that after going down a little bit in price, which was due to, I think, mostly a plex sale, it will turn out here, not necessarily anything else. We are back on the upward trend. We're back to 2.8 million, which is very close to the previous peak, and the real question, of course, is going to be, does plex have enough momentum to keep going up, which to me would be a little bit surprising, because I do still think that in the summer generally we see a bit of a pullback for plex, and summertime is definitely coming. On the other hand, we also just had a big fight in Auga, so that may increase the interest in the game a little bit. We have the drone event, of course, so a couple of people might definitely be coming back to check that out as well. So all of that may spur a bit of plex demand, and of course the impact. What does it mean that ghost training is now an exploit? People will get banned, wealth will be taken away. Will all of that have an impact on plex? That's very difficult to gauge exactly, but all of that will probably be playing in this market as well. And so at the moment, yeah, plex are very expensive. They're heading back towards their 1-year high, as you can see in the little bit of talking that I did. The plex that was going for less than 2.8 million is gone already. And in numbers, we can see this is one thing that's maybe a little bit worrying from time to time. 112, 112, 112. We can clearly see that this is one player that is doing this. that is putting up sell orders of the same volumes. This is a tactic that I also like to use, is to create a whole wave of sell orders from my own products, so that you know, I'm happy with a tiny percentage being bought at the lowest price, but then if the price does go up, things will gradually ramp up in price and my average price will actually be pretty damn good. So this is something that I do as well, but seeing this happen with these kinds of numbers on plex, well, this is less than 1 plex though. 112 is like a fifth of a full old plex. So I think that that's maybe why this looks worse than it actually is. We would have to see the same thing happen with orders like this 30,000 and 5,000 plex and things like that, and that is not happening. So yeah, maybe I was panicking a little bit before actually judging the situation correctly on seeing a single player do all of these sell orders. But plex back up in price and back close to a 1-year high. We'll see if this is actually a breakout that will sustain any momentum. Next up, we'll do the multiple pilot training certificate. That one is still going down in price on average. Volumes are up, but this market, well, it's a little bit bigger at this point. To 1.25 billion for a multiple pilot training certificate seller. The first one is also in Cheetah Station, so we can now take this filter off, I think. Yeah, oh, this is actually pretty interesting that there are some being sold in the player-owned trade hubs as well. But in general, this is actually a very small market and people are trying to buy these for 1.15 billion. So that is a decently wide margin. I think that this decrease in price will stop as well, considering what plex have been doing. So next week, we'll have to see if the correlation does manage to hold up. At the moment, it's not really doing so. Next up, we've got the skill extractors here. That of course does follow plex very closely. So that one is again back up to the previous high point. 320 million for the sellers, 312 million for the buyers. Yep. And then let's go for the large skill injectors first. Those are now going down in price a little bit. I do wonder if there will be an impact from ghost training here, although in theory that should mean less supply and higher prices. So I'm often quite surprised at what these markets tend to do here. Sometimes they're completely counter to my personal intuition. 742.4 million for a large skill injector. This used to be 600 million, something like that. So it's already quite a premium from their introduction. And 740 million for some skill points. It's already a decent price, a decent amount of ISK to have to gather. It's something that is still doable, but this is definitely becoming like a long-term goal, I would say, for alpha clone characters. That is a little bit tricky to wrap your head around if you're just starting out on the game, which is of course the reason that CCP came out with the small skill injectors, and these are basically still in the stabilization phase because they are so new. They are currently selling for 148 million ISK and the buyers are at 137 million ISK. And you know, the large skill injectors heading towards 1 billion ISK, that again becomes a number that for an alpha clone or for a new player is so much ISK that it's almost impossible or very difficult to view a pathway to that in a reasonable time frame. Small skill injectors, 150 million, that is something I think that an alpha clone could shoot for. And then of course this is CCP's marketing. This does explain that this is a business decision, but you know, you can see this as a business decision, I would say, but this also, I would say, gives new players a bit of a visible path, goals that they can actually shoot for, that are maybe a bit more doable in scale than having to earn a plex here. A small skill injector and then a 50 million, you know, a little bit lucky in some normal exploration, or you know, this is a grind that is doable, that is manageable, and this then can give them a hope that with skill injectors they can eventually get into the better ships so that they can become more efficient and start to earn those large skill injectors, and then eventually start to earn 500 plex as stacks for their subscription. So I would say that this is a smaller step, something that will hopefully help some newer players bridge that gap of experience, find a way to create a goal for themselves in the game earlier on. So I think that that's maybe part of the design here as well, next to it becoming a business decision, of course. So that's it for the plex related stuff. Let's move on to some minerals at 20 minutes. And here I think that the picture, oh man, I really don't like this, 14. Maybe for the minerals, we'll go for Jita Station itself. It's a bit more bulky, more tricky to move, much lower in price. I think it's generally sold in Jita, right? I mean, there's one sell order of 23 million units, but it's 10 jumps out. So yeah, I think for minerals, we'll take out the bottom filter as well, and then for the rest, we'll keep it, especially for the PI. So let's go like this. Here is titanium, still up a little bit on the chart, although we are down a tiny fraction from last week, and in the last few months we've basically been moving sideways. What I do like to see here is that at the tail end here we are buckling the trend a little bit on the upwards side of things. We're slowly moving towards 5 ISK. If we could reach that, I think that there is a good chance that we might be able to sustain 5 ISK and start moving at least around that price range, whereas at the moment we're probably moving around the 570, 470, something like that, 475 price range, and then a little bit above that. So 480 for the sellers, 473 for the buyers, a very narrow margin when it comes to sellers and buyer in volumes. 50 million here, 300 million here, another 150 here, and a billion down here. But that's at 5 ISK. That's very interesting, trying to get that 5 ISK in. I think there is hope for it, considering the latest trends here. And on the buyer side, 300 million here, 150 million here, 300 million here as well. So once we hit 5 ISK, we're going to have a very hard time maintaining that, because that's when the billions of volumes come out. But up until that point, this all feels like there is decent demand, like it is really nicely balanced, and that titanium will be able to sustain a price in the 480s, in the 490s. Hopefully it can manage to keep this trend up, and hopefully we will actually see 5 ISK at some point, because for HiSec miners this is actually a nice little trend in the last few months when it comes to their mining of stuff like feldspar. Moving on to pyrite, that's actually not the same trend, definitely a bit of a breakout here on higher volume, so quite a bit of purchasing happening in pyrite. Sellers at 686, heading towards 7 ISK. Let's hope that we can reach that once again. Buyers are at 654, 750 million here being bought, 100 million here, 700 million here, and 200 million here for the sellers as well. Again, feels like a decently balanced picture despite being at a serious pull up in price here. So again, I think that there is some hope that pyrite will start moving a little bit below 7 ISK in all likeliness at this point. So hopefully we don't see a massive flood on this increase in price. That would be extremely good news for HiSec miners. All of this may be the, not Megasite, but Mexalon next. Maybe the nerfs finally coming through a little bit in the market. Here's Mexalon, that is not such good news, going down below 70 ISK if I'm not mistaken. 68.5 for the sellers, 65.4 for the buyers. And here 100 million, 40 million, 65 million, compared to 7 million, 3 million, 11 million. Obviously more supply than demand in Mexalon at the moment. So this is not good news. Mexalon was the one source of efficient mining, of mining in HiSec that actually brought you a decent amount of ISK, considering the value of this one mineral, and that one is now pulling back, but it's happening at the same time as some more ISK is flowing into the pyrite market. So hopefully in general we can still maintain a decent yield for HiSec miners, which is personally what I'm most worried about. All right, nice pattern. Here is Isogen, increased volumes, increased price as well. And that is a bit below 60, yeah, 75.16 or 75.7 almost for the sellers, 57 0.70 almost for the sellers, 54.05 for the buyers. So here Isogen above 50 ISK, which I think is good news. And decently likely, I would say here again, well, sellers winning out a little bit, 30 million, 45 million, 24 million, buyers 16, 10, and 35 a little bit lower. But I think that there is a slight hope, considering that some buyers are coming in well above 50, that will start moving in the 50 to 60 range. And next up here we got Noxium, also a bit of a jump up, not on that much of a volume increase, but it's good to see 400 coming into play. 396 for the sellers of Noxium, 391 is for the buyers. They are forced up a little bit as well. When it's an increasing price like that, of course, volumes come in, 31 million, 10 million here. That is, of course, going to keep the price from going stratospheric. It's normal, but I don't think that these volumes are completely out of line either. So, all right, in general, bit of an uptick on most high-sec minerals. Mexalon, though, is going below 70. In the null-sec minerals, we have Zytrine that's basically moving sideways, still selling for a bit above 1000 ISK, 1020, and the buyers are at 995 ISK. This is, historically speaking, still a very good price, a pretty low price for Zytrine, but considering the rest of the chart, you know, we'd need to break that trend and go towards 900 ISK for me to actually call a buy order or a bottom price here. So I think that that is still possible, although considering the nerfs in null-sec mining for the Rorcal, it is possible that it's a bit more tricky to see that happening. And so from that perspective, this could be a bottom price here and the right time to buy. I would say if you're planning to use it, if you have a use for that Zytrine, this is definitely a good time to buy, because 1000 ISK, historically speaking, is actually a pretty low price. Megasite next, also moving sideways. So basically these markets have been stabilizing. 1200 for the sellers, 1186 for the buyers here. Maybe some newer viewers may also notice that 15 million here, 1.5 million. So there's actually a decent amount here, with 2.6 million here being bought, but especially in the Megasite you can see 1.8 million, oops, cancel, 2.6 million, 1.7 million, and the buyers are at 400,000, 500,000. You have to go quite a bit lower to see a million in the buy orders. This is not the same imbalance as with the high-sec minerals. Why? Because in these null-sec minerals, which have to be mostly important, it tends to be the sellers that dictate these prices, and the buyers are there for their opportunistic reasons. But you can see that the margin is very narrow, and most people that buy Megasites, or most transactions, I would say, tend to be people buying the Megasite straight from the sellers, and most sellers have the patience to set up a sell order and they don't go for these buy orders, which is why this imbalance in volumes tends to not be a show of a trend. So here we go, Megasite also moving sideways, which makes me suggest, or which suggests to me that Morphite will also be moving sideways, and it is at 9,473 for the sellers, 9,100 for the buyers, still well below 10,000 ISK. I think if a big war comes out and some Tech 2 fleets get destroyed, that we could see this jump above 10,000 ISK, but at the moment, no, it's just not happening, and these are not the best buy opportunities either. I've bought some Morphite for less than 9,000 ISK, so that is something to keep in mind as well. And that is the mineral market. Quite interesting to see what those moves in the high-sec minerals are going to mean. Next up, we've got some PI. That's at 2820. And so for this one, we'll start here with the construction blocks. We will put up the filters to see for the extra demand that that is created by buy orders. With a range in the trade hubs, in the player-owned trade hubs. Sometimes it's a bit annoying, as you can see here, 12 jumps out, 40 for 20 million, completely puts everything out of whack. But construction blocks, slow uptrend, basically a sideways movement at around the 12.5k mark, 13,000 for the sellers, 12,200 for the buyers. I would say the average price for construction blocks, maybe a tiny bit above that. And then we've got 34,000 coming in here, 42,000 coming in here, slightly oversupplied. I think we'll either move sideways because sellers maybe tend to win out a little bit over the buyers in PI. But I don't think that we'll reach those high points of 15k anymore at this point. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, it's actually been a decently volatile ride in PI, but for construction blocks, I would say a little bit above average or average, so it's okay to sell. I wouldn't blame you if you start to stock up on these things. Consumer electronics next. Last year worked on a 1-year high. It has to give ground after that, of course, but it is still selling for 16,300 ISK and the buyers are at 15,750 ISK. So not that much of a margin, pretty high price, well above average. Still a great time to sell your consumer electronics. Coolants next here, that's much more of the same picture as construction blocks, around a little bit below 12.5k on average. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,800 for the buyers. Very narrow margin. I would say that this is pretty close to average when it comes to coolant prices, maybe even a little bit below that, although coolants very easily made on gas plants. So yeah, 12k on average. I think that that's actually definitely possible. Enriched uranium next, that also had to give ground after a peak in March and is now still above average, I do think. 15,800 for the sellers, 15,100 for the buyers. Still above average, I would say, but keep in mind that the average price for coolants for enriched uranium will not be as low as coolants, because these are made, this product is made on a completely different set of planets that's much more difficult to find. I think stuff like plasma planets, or what you need to create enriched uranium on a single planet. So 15k, maybe a little bit below that, is probably the average price you should look at. And as you can see here, we're slowly going to cross that Rubicon. The question is, yeah, does this downward trend have enough momentum, or will the fact that coolants, for instance, are starting to move sideways means that enriched uranium will start to move sideways as well, a bit above its average. Mechanical parts next, again also moving sideways here. 11,900, so 12,000 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. I would say this is probably around the average. This is a very unusual chart where for like 8-9 months straight mechanical parts went up here in price, and we had to give ground on that, but I think this is still an okay price. Almost 12,000 for mechanical parts. I wouldn't blame you if you're starting to sell, if you're still selling here, especially considering the entire charts, but I think historically speaking, this could still be close to the average. Oxygen next, probably starting to move sideways at a little bit above 400 at this point, so it's good to see it crawling out of the hole, but it's not going to go to really high prices at the moment. 454 for the sellers, 400 is for the buyers. The buyers are maintaining a price range above 400, but only just. And oxygen still, I would say, a little bit below average. Maybe the sellers are on average, and in general though, pretty risky, I would say, to still make a move on this one. You should have moved on this very low price range here, when you could probably have bought stuff for like 320, 330, stuff like that, but not the right time to sell yet either. Robotics next. This one is actually pretty interesting because robotics on average, I would say, should cost less than 100,000 ISK. But here we can see for almost a full year we've been above that. Another very nice peak in March here, and they are still selling. Yeah, but actually here first seller coming in for 101,000 ISK. Buyers are at 101,000 ISK as well. So there is still this strong demand, 47,000, 10,000, 14,000 for robotics, but pressure is coming in as well, and we're coming closer and closer to that 100,000 mark. Which, if we go below that, is probably normal price, 100,000 on average for the sellers at the high end here. So here again, very strong performance in March. We had to give back all of this ground, and I suspect that we'll start to move sideways at around 100,000 ISK, which is a normal price for robotics. We are still a little bit above that, but not by much anymore. Rocket fuel here completely normalized back into the old trade range of 11 to 12,000 ISK, 12,248 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. This is obviously a lack of demand, pretty wide gap between sellers and buyers that is probably slowly being filled up on the seller side of things that go lower and lower and lower. But yeah, again here, March, April, really strong performance, well above average. Very weird chart here for rocket fuel, very stable. This was probably very stable even in the months before the chart, and now after this bump up here that lasted several months, really great time to sell, we're back down a little bit below, towards or below the average. Probably around the average, I would say. Now here comes the structure related advanced PI materials like self-harmonizing power cores, stabilizing unfortunately at 2.1 million on the chart. Excuse me. 2.15 million for the sellers, 2.13 million for the buyers. Very narrow margin, basically finding the price the market is accepting this one here. So we would need some more PI movements through the summer for this to move. I'm hoping that we'll see a better buy opportunity later on, but of course with the keep stars blowing up and with people knowing that the refineries are coming as well, there might just be enough demand out there to support the current price ranges and to not create a clear buy opportunity through the summer. It is possible as well. Superconductors basically flat here as well. 11,600 let's say for the sellers, 10,800 for the buyers. Probably a bit below average at this point, but yeah, I would say a little bit below average at this point. So I would not be selling this actively. Buying, I would personally like to buy this for less than 10k as a short thing. It's up to you to decide if you want to invest in this already. Test cultures basically flat once again, selling for 9,000 ISK, buyers are at 8,000 ISK. I bought some of these well below 8,000 ISK, so here again, it's up to you to decide whether or not you think you should invest in that already. But I think that maybe the summer could create better buy opportunities. And finally, wetware mainframes. Oh, that's quite unusual. Self-harmonizing power cores, stabilizing, sellers and buyers meeting each other. When it comes to the wetware mainframe, a slow downtrend still perceivable here. We're actually at a 1-year low at this point. 2.2 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. This is becoming pretty damn interesting. A little bit more supply coming in, a little bit of a lack of demands. Well, it's actually quite a bit here, but 2 million for wetware mainframes, that starts to be the price point where it could be interesting to invest in some of these. Again, something that I try to share with this as well. When it comes to preparing for structures, for the first structure, especially the citadels, wetware mainframes were a real bottleneck that became almost unavailable on the market. So if you want to prepare for this, I think you know, if you're planning to create more structures, then going in now for buying wetware mainframes, I think is actually a pretty good idea. That's it for PI. Moving on to Tick 1 chips. That's next. 3715. Like that. I think basically we won't see a lot here. The Abaddon is moving back up towards 200 million. Sellers 189, almost 190 million. Buyers are at 160. That's quite interesting. So in general, I do think that the Tick 1 market lags behind a little bit on the mineral market. The mineral market, some high-sec minerals up a little bit, Mixthalon back down a little bit, null-sec minerals basically flat. I would say not really a perceivable impact in the upcoming weeks there. And the Abaddon here though, a little bit of market forces, I guess because of this here, 20 and then another 15, 2 days in a row above average in the volumes created an increase in price up to 180, almost 190 million for the Abaddon. Still, well, it's definitely back on the higher bound here and above its average. A little bit of volatility. Maybe we should see that as a good sign. A little bit of volatility in a battleship market here. The Caracal also up in price a little bit. This could be the battle, of course. Caracal fleets in null-sec tend to be pretty popular. We also saw this go pretty low, 9.5 million here on average. Sellers, I think, below 10 million could have been the trigger for a null-sec alliance to purchase a few, 450 of them or something like that, increasing the price. Sellers are at, that's probably exactly what happened. 10.2 million, buyers are at 9.2 million. Sellers came in up to this a big buyer came in up to this price point. This will be filled up by next week, I think. No worries there, unless something else drastically happens, because the coveter also up in price a little bit here. Quite interesting. 5-day moving average clearly up towards 27.5 million, 27.5 for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. Interesting, up a little bit as well. Let's see if that's a trend. Hurricane, unfortunately, well, median daily prices are up a little bit. Slight volume increase here as well. I saw a Hurricane fleet in Auga yesterday too, but 46.5 for the sellers, 42.5 for the buyers. That's really hardly any movement here. The Maelstrom next, it does show that it's not a general trend here. Still going down in price, 164 for the sellers, 145 million for the buyers of Maelstroms. And here again, I basically think that it's the same pattern as what we see with the Caracal here. If the price drops low enough, and we're starting to be pretty close to that, we'll see a bigger buyer come in with some higher volumes, some higher volumes, some higher volumes. That increases the price, but then that gets filled up with new sellers pretty quickly. So that is probably the market activity that's happening at the moment. It's just not that easy to spot that same pattern with the Abaddon because of the double peak here, which is a little bit weird, and the increased volatility. But I think basically that's what's happening at the moment. Here's the Megatron chart. Also, increased volume, slightly up in price. Currently selling for 170 million. Buyers are at 143 though. Still pretty low. So I think here again, Megatron fleets being bought. Prophecy next, here increased volumes, increase in price. We see the drop off, a little bit of it happening again. Currently, I think that basically people came in, bought everything below 52 million, and now selling for 52 million. Buyers are at 45.3 million. The Scorpion, finally up in price a little bit. That's been a long time coming. So this one went up to 160 million. If this is the volume increase, then that's quite pitiful actually. Maybe 30 ships being bought. 153 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. That could actually be more of just a little bit of interest in the Scorpion from a couple of players creating that price increase here. And then the Vexor could actually be a sign of what's actually happening. Pretty flat, slight uptick on the median daily prices, slight uptick in volumes as well. Interesting. 10.1 million basically for the sellers, 9.2 for the buyers. Slight uptick in prices in a lot of the Take 1 ships here as well. Quite interesting to see that happening. So I think we'll have to keep a close eye on the mineral market trend and to see if this, or to try and figure out what is happening in the Take 1 market. Exactly, I still think that on really low prices, it basically means that some alliances are purchasing bigger fleets and creating this volatility here, which makes it very difficult to make trade ISK on that. It does mean that if you're producing this, unloading your goods at the right time can make you some ISK, but after that the volumes are so abysmal that it's not like you're gonna suddenly sell hundreds of Caracals at more than 10 million. That's just not gonna happen. You're maybe gonna be able to unload a couple at more than 10 million as the rest comes in as well, floods the market, and we're back to the low price ranges. So it's more an opportunity for the patient industrialists, I would say, than actual trade opportunities in the Take 1 market at the moment. Moving on to Take 2 at 43 minutes. There we go. Let's go through these and see if we can spot some opportunities. So the Ares last week, nice sell opportunity, of course going down in price. That doesn't last too much, but we want to see that volatility. That does mean that there is some trade potential in this. 23.7 for the sellers, 21.2 for the buyers. This, of course, it's too late to sell, it's too early to buy, but it's nice to see this sell opportunity on the chart. The Claw next, basically flat at the current price range, selling for 24.3 million. That is not good news. You want to be either higher like these peaks or lower like here so you can buy. So the Claw here, also not in the best place, but at least there was some volatility to be spotted. This was a slight opportunity because you could probably have bought claws for less than 19 million at the best opportunity. Next up here we've got the crow. Don't really like this too much either, but let's see, 22.92. What is this? Damn, it's not showing. It's currently selling for 26 million. Almost interesting. Almost interesting. We'd need to see this volatility go up even higher, up to 27, 28 million. That's where it becomes interesting. So the crow at the moment on an upswing, not as high as I would like to see. The Aries next, going down in price here, coming back towards 45 or 40 million, 47.8 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. It's actually a pretty wide margin, but this is a very weird chart to decide to trade on. So you had this prolonged buy opportunity for less than 40 million, then we went up to 55 million in price here. Now we're basically normalizing in between those two. Flycatcher next, what does this look like? Still, this is not where we want to see the chart, right? By opportunity, less than 55 million, selling at 75 million. So we're in between those two. Unfortunately, nope again. Heretic though, that was a great sell opportunity last week, buying close to 45 million or 50 million. It depends on what the triggers will be. That was a great opportunity, of course. Now we're going back down in price, of course, after maintaining that high price range for more than 10 days. Quite interesting. 59 million for the sellers, 53 million for the buyers. So it's of course still too early to buy, but this was a great sell opportunity for the Heretic. The Hound next, that's too flat. We don't like this. This is why we want to see here December, January. So here I would say look for prices well below 20 million, 19.3 million. I would say still a little bit high. Get rid of everything at 19 million and start purchasing below that. That could be interesting for the Hound. It's not that much anymore. Let's keep that in mind. It's just 9, 12 more buy orders filled, and you're at the right time to pounce on some Hound purchasing, but very stable in the last few weeks. Malediction next, slowly always going up in tier. I think considering that we have these flat price ranges here, that means that these are massively oversupplied, and so it's very tricky to actually make anything happening trade wise in this. I think if it keeps stepping up like this, like it's doing at the moment. So the Malediction, it's just basically so oversupplied that you're not going to get enough volatility even on increased volumes, and thus I would not look to actively trade in that one. The Manticore though, that is quite interesting. Look at how low we were going here, down to 22.5 million on the chart. Buyers are, except for one here, at 21.6 million, so you could have easily bought these, I think, for less than 22 million a couple of days ago. We are on our way up, but that was a great buy opportunity here in the Manticore just a couple of days ago. Nemesis next, here again, we don't like that it's too much, that it's in small steps here, but buying opportunity less than 20 million, sell opportunity 25 million. There is some trade money to be had there. Currently buyers are at 20 million, sellers 22.6. So again, we're on our way down from a sell opportunity. So of course it's not the right time to make your moves. Purifiers, that's I think pretty nice. Let's start up here, 26.5, going down to 21 million, and then back up to 26.9. Currently selling for 26.9 million. Buyers are up to 24.5 million, but you could have bought these probably for 20 million or 21 million or a bit less than that. So here again, Purifier, nice sell opportunity at the moment. I couldn't tell you to buy anything in the Take-Two markets. Maybe look out for Manticores. Maybe. It's probably a little bit too late though. And a sell opportunity in the Purifier. There is some volatility there, which I think is good news in general. The Saber, that's unfortunately a bit too timid on the chart here, going for 53 million and buying for 50 million. You'd have to gamble something major happening on your buy orders here at 50 million to try and make some ISK out of that. But here again, January, March, you do have nice spikes up to almost 70 million. So buying at 50, selling at 70 sounds like a good deal to me. So the Take-Two market, some volatility, not as much as what we would like to see, but there are some buy and some sell opportunities that do form every week apparently. Moving on to Tech 3 at 48.40. Let's go over these tactical destroyers here. That's the Confessor market, again very flat at 30 million, so majorly oversupplied, 158 here. Not as much oversupply anymore, so maybe this is your buy opportunity. If this keeps drying up, then we might see a lovely opportunity like this one here, but it's pretty risky. Again, I would not do this with too many ships. The Hecate next year, again, you can see even on increased volumes, basically flat at 30 million. That's because there's still 47, 50, 30, 30, 36, 113 here. It's still very, very much oversupplied, although it's not as bad as last week. So keep that in mind. It looks like there is some purchasing happening here at the moment, and we may be in for finally seeing some actual market forces. Jackdaw, selling for 40 million, 28.5 for the buyers. All right. Massive volume spike. Averages still here on those buy orders, apparently. That's really weird. Am I missing something in the filters? Not really. Okay, Jackdaw, sell opportunity. I mean, you could have bought these for 30 million even a couple days ago, and they're now selling for 40 million. So I think a pretty big Jackdaw purchase must have just happened, which again, the Auga fight might be the reason behind that, because I did see a nice Jackdaw fleet there as well. So Jackdaw, look at that, selling for 40 million. Unless it's a bug, it's a sell opportunity. And then finally this Vapel, you can see extremely flat here at 30 probably. Yeah, is it oversupplied still? This one is gonna be the hardest one to chew through. 144, 168, 60, so still hundreds of Vapels going for 30 million ISK here, which means that you can buy them at this price range, but again, don't go crazy. Then the cruisers here, slight uptick in the Legion. Currently selling for 126 million, bars are at 118. So yeah, slight uptick, probably some investments starting when it comes to the upcoming rebalance of these Tech 3 cruisers. That's, I think, what's happening here. Maybe some replacements as well, because Tech 3's played a major role in the latest Nullsec fight. Loki next, nice double jump up here. That's quite interesting. Currently selling for 125, buyers are at 121. So yeah, the Loki buy opportunity, you know, 110 million, that is over. People are now starting to actively speculate on this ship, which makes sense because it will become like the first, I think, ship in EVE Online that will have bonuses to both shield tanking and armor tanking. It will definitely become one of those ships that can fit in any fleet as a support. So that is probably why this one is showing most volatility and a nice volume spike as well. Proteus next, also finally slightly up in price. All right, so your real buy opportunity was as low as 110 again. Currently 131, 131 million for the sellers of Protea, 116 for the buyers. That's still a pretty wide margin. Still, you have a slight chance to buy Protea for less than 120. So here at this point, I think people are basically considering the volumes, making their moves on their investments. The Tengu, just not very popular. It does also still have a lot of them to go. So 115 for the sellers, 108 for the Tengu for the buyers. If you're looking to still make that investment for some Tech 3 ships for less than 110 million, put up some buyers for the poor Tengu here. Support it all. He's probably jealous from all the other cruisers that are actually up in price a little bit. Tengu, so popular, really an iconic ship in EVE Online, often flown by Nullsec powers quite a bit as well, although again in Auga I saw mostly Legions and Protea, so it's fallen out of favor, but that might make it your opportunity to still bounce on the Tech 3 market, because we can clearly see that people are buying their cruisers as an investment in preparation of the rebalance. And then finally at 53 minutes, the extra product request from last week, which is for the pirate battleships. So battleships, faction, pirate. Let's take a look at these. I think that CCP did nerf the drop rates or something like that of the blueprints, and so that is why we're seeing here the bargains shoot up from 0.8 billion to 1.25 billion on massive well, massive. It's not even that massive compared to the rest of the days, but on pretty big purchases. So Barghest here, that is the increase in price because they will become a bit more rare. The same for the Macarial, yeah, quite interesting. So those really big Macarial fleets that you constantly see stomping around in Nullsec have just become quite a bit more expensive. 520 million for the sellers, basically 463 for the buyers. Very nice jump up. I think a couple of months ago I looked at these and some of them looked pretty low. It was the right time to buy, but again, this is a CCP intervention that is causing a pretty big shift in the market. Here's the Nestor up, but not by that much, going from 400 million to 500 million, so 25% increase. Here's the Nightmare, also up towards 550 million, going when it went for like 250 million a couple months ago. 520 million for the sellers of Nightmares. Here the volume increase on the announcement. Rattlesnake Victory Edition is a bit of an outlier here, but the Balgorn up in price quite substantially as well. And all of that right before the Alliance tournament. So maybe CCP wants those big prizes on the on what are they called, like the captainships or the flagships in the Alliance tournament. So I think for the conspiracy nuts, that's the reason why this nerf came in at this time. Here's the Balgorn also going up to 360 million. Is also actually going down in price already quite rapidly. And then here's the Rattlesnake, which I still had to buy one actually, so it's a bit early at 350 million. Currently selling for 515 million ISK, so quite a bit more expensive all of a sudden. And finally, the Vindicator also starting at 350, currently selling for 480 million. So I think it's the drop rates, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think that CCP is lowering the drop rate of blueprint copies in Nullsec for these faction battleships, pirate faction battleships, in order to make them a bit more expensive and more rare in Nullsec fighting, because they had become and were definitely a major or the major meta, the major fleet composition at the moment in Nullsec warfare, because they are just that powerful, but also because they were being farmed to death, and as a result they dropped down. Maybe the carry nerf also is going to have had its impact here, because of course less damage, less efficient ratting, probably fewer drops of these as well. And that was the suggestion for this week. Thank you very much for that. I always do try to honor requests for stuff to check as the extra product, so feel free to post that in the comments if you have other ideas. And maybe we'll give the Concord ships a bit more time before we actually take a look at them, and maybe see if CCP comes out with numbers around the controversy before we check those. But those are the battle ships for the pirate factions this week. Lovely jump up here. It's on a CCP intervention, so if we had taken the gamble, we could have made quite a bit of ISK on this one. Anyways, that's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.